Once, there was a master who spoke of a student before he knew himself, and after, when he began to awaken and see he was far more than he had been told, that student rose against the council, defying their will, and rallied others who would not remain idle while innocents burned beneath the Mandalorian advance. To the council, this defiance was nothing but a fall into darkness. Yet perhaps it was never a fall at all, but a sacrifice. The line between the two is fragile, and this student understood it more than anyone. Without his choice, the galaxy itself might have been lost. The council did not change him. They merely stripped away the surface to reveal what had always been there, someone who would wage war to protect others. Many who once sat at this master's feet also chose defiance, turning from the Jedi path to follow their own convictions. For that, the council named them failures, claiming her teachings only led to ruin. Yet she spoke of truth hidden between extremes, of strength found not in blind devotion to a code, but in the courage to break it. To believe in an ideal is to be ready to betray it, for only then does one understand what it truly means. That, she claimed, was the lesson of strength, one no Jedi, no Sith had ever truly learned. Long ago, before he even knew himself, he was a student, guided and shaped until the day he chose to stand against the very council that had tried to mold him. After speaking with his old teacher, he defied their orders and led those who would follow into battle against the invading enemy, not for conquest, but to protect the Republic from destruction. The council called it a fall, but perhaps it was never a fall at all. Perhaps it was sacrifice. He saw what others could not, that to cling blindly to rules was weakness, that to truly understand meant stepping beyond the code and risking betrayal of ideals for the sake of something greater. His path was not corruption but revelation, the stripping away of illusions until his true self emerged, a warrior who would wage war to save others, even if the council branded him lost. And in that lesson lay the strength his teacher had always spoken of, a strength that neither Jedi nor Sith had ever fully grasped. One's strength may be bound, but the will can draw on the strength of others, and that belief shattered the trust between Master and Council. Feeling betrayed, the Jedi Master led the others in condemning Kreia, blaming her for students who had fallen, fought, or abandoned their path, and so they exiled her. As war consumed the galaxy, Revan broke from the Order, gathering knights to defend the Republic, and in the far reaches he heard whispers of a forbidden world. Malachor V called to him, its shadow hidden even from his apprentice, and there he uncovered more than he sought, a world steeped in corruption, its soil drenched in war, feeding on death, drowning all who walked it in darkness. Beneath its surface, the ruins of cities and the Traya Academy revealed the secrets of the ancient Sith, their records and power waiting like a trap. From the first step he took, Revan felt the overwhelming pull of the dark side that lingered in every stone of that cursed planet. He uncovers the terrible potential of Malachor V and bends it to his will, binding loyal followers through its dark energy and raising a hidden fortress where no eyes of the Republic would ever see. A year later, with an army of Jedi shackled to his command, he springs the perfect trap, luring the Mandalorians into the skies above the cursed world. Waiting in silence is the mass shadow generator, a weapon forged for annihilation. As battle rages, the switch is thrown, and the heavens collapse, fleets torn from orbit, ships crushed into the planet's surface, the very crust splitting open as the world screams in agony. In a single breath, soldiers, Mandalorians, Jedi, all are obliterated, their deaths leaving behind a wound in the Force itself, an echo of endless screams that kills any who dare to hear it. The once living world is now a shattered wasteland, scarred beyond recognition. To some, this moment marks the point of no return, the final step into the shadows. But others see only a deeper, darker truth about the chains binding the galaxy. The galaxy itself would have been lost had he not gone to war, and perhaps the mantle of darkness was taken not from desire but necessity to restrain an evil far greater. When the cataclysm of Malachor was unleashed, the shattered surface still bore the Traya Academy, preserved in silence, waiting in shadow. From this ruin, he pursued the whispers of the ancients who had once walked its halls, seeking their hidden empire beyond the map stars. In time, he founded a secret kingdom of darkness preparing to rise. Alone, he departed into the uncharted abyss, his fate veiled for centuries, a mystery even to those closest to him. I did not know his path, nor whether I would have followed, though I know he would need warriors from both light and shadow. Perhaps you shall find that place and stand with him at the end of all things. I remained to guide others, but when he vanished beyond the known heavens, I feared he had truly fallen. In sorrow, I traced his echoes, the wound in the Force calling me back to Malachor. There, among broken stones and shadows, I found the academy steeped in the dark currents, its halls haunted by assassins who lingered with no master. They did not strike, but instead offered fragments of forbidden truth, and as one who seeks knowledge, I took it into my hands. The truths of the cosmos, spoken in the silence of ruin. He might have become the Dark Lord out of necessity to stop something far worse from rising. Even after the mass shadow generator tore Malachor V apart, the Traya Academy endured, standing broken but unyielding. After victory there, he turned to the forbidden knowledge within its walls, seeking the ancient Sith who once walked those halls, and in time, he uncovered a hidden empire lurking in the unknown regions, plotting an invasion of the galaxy. Determined to stop it, he vanished into the void, his fate sealed away for centuries, never again seen by the one who had taught him. She wondered if she too should have gone, for he would need warriors of both light and dark, but instead she remained, guiding others down the path. Fearing he had fallen, she followed echoes of his presence back to the scar of Malachor, where the wound in the Force whispered to her. Among ruins steeped in shadow, she found the Traya Academy once more, its halls haunted by Sith assassins who offered not their blades but their secrets, and she, ever hungry for knowledge, took them, as they declared, the truths of the cosmos. She declares that the Force itself must be destroyed, pointing to the wound at Malachor V as proof that if it can be injured, it can also be killed. Immersed in the whispers of the ancient Sith, she surrenders to the dark side, taking the name Darth Traya and rebuilding the Traya Academy to forge new Sith who would strike at the Jedi who cast her out, though her true designs remain hidden. Yet a question lingers as she seeks to end the Force. Why embrace it? Why wield its darkness? She answers with bitter irony, saying she uses it like a poison, hoping through understanding it she will learn to kill it, though perhaps it is nothing more than the excuse of an old woman dependent on what she despises. As the remnants of the Empire rally to her, she searches for other wounds in the Force, and in that search, she binds herself to two figures of ruin. One, a lord of hunger consumed by endless craving. The other, a lord of pain sustained only by his torment. Together, they form a triumvirate, united by their hatred, yet doomed by diverging paths. Among them, the Lord of Hunger stands apart, once a soldier at Malachor V, whose soul was scarred by the cataclysm, becoming a hollow wound that devours all life. His humanity stripped away as his hunger grew without end. He never meant to do it the first time, but it happened, draining the life from another being, a sickening and terrifying act that, for a fleeting heartbeat, felt blissful as his pain, sickness, and gnawing hunger vanished. Yet that hunger soon returned, fiercer than before, and no matter how many he consumed, the craving only grew. Where he saw endless torment, a Dark Master saw opportunity, promising to teach him the power to devour entire worlds and twist the wound within him for her own designs. And unaware of her schemes, he accepted and became her apprentice. Another figure, broken and rotting, held together by sheer rage and dark energy, endured constant agony just to keep his body from collapsing into death, and he too accepted her hand, though his endless suffering made him impatient and resentful. In time, both apprentices turned on their master, one stripping her of her power, the other finishing the betrayal. Cast down, exiled, and stripped of everything, she was left to suffer in darkness, while the Devourer rose as Dark Lord, and the fragile alliance, born of hatred and ambition, shattered into the void. Betrayed once by the Jedi and again by the Sith, the shadowed figure known as Kreia was cast aside by all she had served. Her former allies, driven by hunger and cruelty, sought to erase the Jedi from existence, leaving their order shattered and scattered. Stripped of her power and humiliated, she shed the mantle of Darth Traya and returned as Kreia, walking once more among the Republic to pursue her hidden design. Whispers lingered about how she survived the hunger of her disciples, some believing her bond to the Force was never fully broken, left intact just enough for her torment to endure. Yet exile had marked her again, and her path bent toward another wound in the Force, a scar born of destruction unleashed at Malachor V. There, in the echoes of the Mandalorian Wars, Meetra Surik had ordered the activation of the mass shadow generator, watching as countless lives were consumed in its crushing wave. That moment of devastation carved a rift so deep that Surik, in an instinct of survival, severed her own connection to the Force, leaving her deaf to its call. The galaxy bore its wounds, the Force bled, and two exiles, one by betrayal, the other by choice, were fated to converge. Survival here is twisted and relative, for when the cataclysm struck, one figure cut herself off from the Force to endure, while another was consumed by its echo, reshaped into something entirely different. She became the wound in the Force, proof of what restraint and choice could forge, while he embodied the darker path she narrowly avoided. Even Masters whispered of irony, that one who could no longer hear the Force was freer than those bound to it, more resilient than the very Jedi who depended on it like crutches. Strip them of their gift and they are revealed as nothing more than fragile beings, unable to wield saber or blaster with true strength. Yet she stood apart, the only one to return willingly to the temple, to face judgment and defend her actions with fire in her voice. And when betrayal came, not from blade but from decree, she was cast out, her saber surrendered, her ties severed, branded defiant, a Jedi no longer. They spoke in heavy tones. The Council divided yet bound by the same unease. One voice insisted she was not truly present, only an echo, and that no Jedi had been lost that day she had lost herself. Another warned she had walked the same path as the fallen before her, but lacked the strength to endure it. Doubt turned inward, some blaming teachings that might have guided the wayward, others urging responsibility rather than blame. Yet all had felt it, the emptiness clinging to her, a wound steeped in darkness. Some feared she would return to the one who had gone before, perhaps to something worse. One reminded the others this was not the same figure they remembered, but someone already marked by death though still alive, cutting through fate like a blade. Talk shifted toward the grim acceptance of exile, that her punishment was to live broken and cast out, never to know why. And so it was decided. She left known space, vanishing beyond the rim for years, while shadows devoured the Order. The Sith hunted relentlessly, nearly erasing the Jedi, leaving only fragments, whispers, and the heavy silence of a galaxy consumed by fear. As soon as she returned, there were those who wanted her hunted down. Atris set the trap, orchestrating her return and leaking the news so the Sith would be drawn out. Word spread fast, attracting hunters and the Sith Triumvirate. Even Kreia herself, who knew her former students would see killing the Exile as their triumph. Yet Kreia needed her, the wound in the Force that surrounded her, so she moved swiftly. The Republic dispatched a ship, the Harbinger, to bring her to Telos, but the Sith struck. In the chaos, Kreia saved her from certain death. From the moment she boarded, the Exile endured being drugged, sealed in a kolto tank, and left unconscious, only to awaken on a silent mining station where every soul had been slaughtered. Her first encounter was grim, Kreia, waiting among the dead. Searching for answers among corpses? I am Kreia, your rescuer, as you are mine. Our enemy is here. We must leave now. Together they moved through the desolate halls, hunted by assassins responsible for the attacks. Escape was the only choice, for to linger meant death. Joined by an imprisoned man and a loyal droid once tied to Revan, they fought their way out, pursued relentlessly by Sith shadows, their survival forged in desperation and fragile alliance. The Exiles' bond with their master became undeniable when the shadowed figure of Sion emerged, warning that this fight was his alone. Yet the Exile stood firm, refusing to flee, knowing Sion was blinded long ago by his own hunger for power. Their clash burned with betrayal, with Sion hissing that his master's whispers no longer haunted his mind and that the Jedi were already dead, save one. Pain surged through the bond as the Exile felt their master's torment, escaping Sion and his assassins only to be thrust into a desperate flight through a storm of asteroids. The crew bickered in panic, machines howled, and doom loomed with every missed shot or stray collision, until a narrow escape left them reeling in disbelief. Questions turned to accusations: why the Sith hunted them so relentlessly, why even Republic warships sought their end, and the truth struck like a blade. Exile or not, they were the last Jedi. The lone light the Sith needed to snuff out. To stand against them would demand more than courage. It would require weapons, allies, and a teacher. Yet even with all of that, doubt lingered whether it would ever be enough. Two voices clashed in sharp tones, one mocking the other's endless speeches, the banter laced with irritation and reluctant concern. A passenger suffers silently, hiding her pain behind pride, refusing to show weakness, especially to him, though she leans on his presence more than she admits. Whispers of a deadly bond stir unease, a connection that shares strength and agony alike, a gift and a curse flowing between them. The old teacher seizes the moment, weaving her influence, promising training, guidance, even salvation, while cloaking her true intent beneath calm wisdom. With no council left to turn to, no allies untainted by betrayal, the exile is left facing the stark truth. They are each other's only hope, two broken figures bound together against the weight of the galaxy. And so it began, with the whisper of the Force stirring once more, as the exile accepted the mentor's hand. Training was promised, not in rigid lessons, but through words, presence, and a bond deeper than flesh. The first truth laid bare. Shadowy hunters sought the end of all Jedi, stalking from silence until none remained. Their reign assured, whether under banner of Republic or Sith. With the exile's connection to the Force rekindled, faint though it was, the danger grew. Sharper power was both shield and beacon, and the stronger she became, the more relentless the pursuit. Yet between warnings came riddles of philosophy. If the Jedi Order once held the Republic together, what now would hold it when the Order lay in ruins? Conflict, said the teacher, is the forge of a people. Too long had the Republic been stagnant, a beast wheezing in its own decay. The Jedi were but a shell, and shells always break, leaving only the raw heart of man exposed. For war was never truly waged by ships or armies, but in the hidden battlefield of every soul, in the endless clash between shadow and light. In the shadows of the galaxy, Kreia's voice lingers, sharp as a blade and heavy with secrets. She speaks of power, not in weapons or armies, but in the currents of the Force itself, light and dark, shaping all. Revan was once her greatest lesson, a storm of will who carried both salvation and ruin within his soul. To the exile, though, she offers something darker. When she looks upon her student, it is as if she sees the very death of the Force. Yet beneath her riddles, Kreia unveils truths twisted in wisdom, teaching that memory can be cloaked, presence erased, and trust forever uncertain. She warns that her words matter only as much as they are believed, yet insists that she must be judged for what she truly is, without disguise. When asked if she is Jedi or Sith, her reply is, defiance itself. Why should such titles matter? To her, they are fragments of a whole, illusions that divide the galaxy. She admits to once holding the galaxy by its throat, to having inspired both creation and destruction, even claiming that the darkest lords may have learned their cruelty from her. But Kreia dismisses such confessions as hollow. What matters is not the name she once bore, but the role she now claims. Teacher, philosopher, the one who dares to walk the line between salvation and annihilation. He vowed with solemn weight that once the training was complete, all shadows would be gone, leaving only truth between master and apprentice. With that promise, they pressed onward toward the hidden academy, though mistrust lingered for the fool at the cockpit, whose loyalties bent always toward himself. Kreia's unseen hand cloaked her presence as they arrived, slipping past Atris's senses, while the exile's companions found themselves locked away once more, muttering at their endless fate of cells and cages. The icy halls revealed themselves as a Jedi Academy in disguise, a place shrouded in secrecy, and whispers of Atris's cunning echoed in every corner. Yet unease stirred, fear of the Jedi gnawed, and suspicion thickened as Kreia pierced deeper, seizing thoughts unspoken, pulling them into the open with merciless clarity. Resistance broke into strained cries, and in that moment, power and philosophy intertwined, each revelation another thread in a web of manipulation and uneasy truth. Fear twists into guilt, writhing like a worm inside him, and when pressed for the reason, he begs that the truth remain hidden, terrified of her judgment. The response is cold yet sharp. There was no shame in scars of the past, but silence carries a price. He is branded a murderer, crude yet useful, bound now to serve her until released, or else face exposure and ruin. His defiance is hollow. Refusal means destruction, for the Jedi's wrath would pale compared to hers. She commands obedience, reminding him he once chose such chains, and he snarls at her manipulations, baffled why one so vicious would waste time on him. She answers with chilling calm. Every game requires pawns, and his role is set. Though he yields bitterly, she insists their meeting was no accident, that fate has drawn their paths together to confront the past before the future can be shaped. Dismissing his protests, she silences him with finality, warning that a critical moment looms, one born from memories of judgment, defiance, and the day that has never been forgotten. The scene unfolds like a storm of words sharpened into blades, where one voice recalls the moment a lightsaber struck stone, keeping the shard as a wound to memory, a reminder of arrogance and defiance against the order. Life, it is said, is nothing but choices, and clinging to a code is surrendering to chains, allowing belief to become the master. The war that once raged was never a promise of salvation, and though the Mandalorians were broken, the true victory remained in question. Accusations fly had the rebels not fought back. Would anyone else have risen, or only sat in silence and contemplation? Fury ignites as one declares the war should have claimed its price at Malachor, while the other hears only shadows in the venom, suspecting hatred disguised as principle. The clash of voices drips with contempt, warlust against weary defiance, until the question is forced. Why come here at all, if not to admit the Council was right? The answer lands heavy. The exile came, bearing warning of Sith rising from the dark, only to be dismissed, denied as a Jedi, accused of betrayal, and warned that survival itself may have been a trap. The command is cold and final. Leave before more danger is drawn here. Yet even as the exile is taken away, the mistress lingers on the memory, unsettled, reminded of something long forgotten, her mask of certainty cracked by the ghost of a bond that refuses to die. She spoke with a weight that carried both memory and bitterness, confessing that once she had stood in judgment of another, certain of nothing, while the other radiated conviction. And ever since that day, she had been haunted by doubt, but never again. For now, she was weary and sought only meditation. Her follower obeyed, promising to shield her from disturbance, even as questions lingered about what wound from the past still chained her. The exile revealed that this woman of the Council had been part of her condemnation, and though her servants seemed loyal, they were curiously blind to the Force, their discipline forming walls against all intrusion. Kreia admitted such probing of minds was not a thing done lightly, and so they turned to depart. Yet the journey left one companion weak, though only with fatigue. And as they pressed on, it became clear that Kreia's claim of restraint applied only to the exile, for she had bent the wills of nearly everyone else, twisting fear and doubt to her purpose, until even those who had once bared their souls to the exile found themselves broken beneath her shadow. She sneered, declaring there would be no more threats and no more demands, severing the bond with a cutting finality. He thought she had held him, but she laughed at the folly, reminding him that what bound him was himself, and she would prove it. Once, she had held the galaxy in her grip, just as he had once held another life and let it fade away. And the memory of that moment was the fear he carried. She spoke of power beyond comprehension, of endless visions that touched all existence, and only in losing it did she see clearly. Now she knew what he buried deep, hidden behind guilt and restless desire, and she could unlock it with ease, for the mind etched every scar into its core. She taunted him with the hunger he once felt, the twisted joy of slaughter, daring him to deny it while she offered her guidance or his hollow freedom. Dismissing him as a murderer, she ordered him away, her voice sharp with contempt. Yet as their journey continued, others walked beside them, unaware of who she truly was. One companion, a clever scholar, began to understand and came close to naming her, but weakness made him falter. With a whisper, she unraveled his thoughts, erasing her name from memory, insisting that even Jedi see only what she allowed. As worlds fell into shadow and scars spread across the galaxy, the exile sensed something greater, a sickness in life itself. reaching for meaning only for it to slip away. And in that moment of doubt, her voice returned, soft and cruel, welcoming the realization at last as she stood revealed, the betrayer, the question hanging sharp in the air. Who was she? Enough? The voice cut through like a blade. The question hung heavy. What was seen in the tangled web of dying worlds, through the lens of the Force itself? The answer came with dread the galaxy's death, not conquest, but an echo spreading outward, devouring all life. Denial followed, accusations of wasted potential, of innocence squandered, of naive love turned weakness. Yet beneath the bitterness lay truth. This was no lust for universal death, no hollow victory. The war was never meant to be won that way. When victory came, it was to be through conviction, through teachings proven true. But the revelation could not be undone. A mind too open, too trusting, was marked to forget save for one gift, the knowledge of the Echo's existence. And so the stage shifted. The shadow of the Sith closing in, assassins hunting, and the Triumvirate named. 3 dark figures loomed above the legions, one feeding on pain, one consumed by endless hunger, and one forged in betrayal. Each a wound carved from the wars of old, each a doom upon all life. And as the comic panels darkened, the warning lingered. So long as one of them endured, all were condemned. He was a shadow who spread his agony across the galaxy, a wound in the Force so great that even a thought of him could summon his presence. And though he could not be defeated, his existence was the price of Sith knowledge that had consumed him. She, too, was hidden, her presence veiled until the time was right, for if revealed too soon, all would collapse. Kreia, ever weaving her designs, guided the Exile toward the broken Jedi Council. For Surik sought answers why the Force had abandoned her, why silence filled her soul. Kreia suggested punishment, that the Council itself had severed her connection, for such a wound could not come without cause. War scars the spirit, but it does not blind one to the Force. Another hand was at work. Surik, unaware, sought the Council's truth, but the Masters scattered, cloaked in fear of the Sith. As they were found, Kreia clouded their sight, shrinking her presence so none would remember her. While in conversation, she revealed herself as a teacher of old, the one who had once shaped Revan. When asked why no one spoke her name, Kreia answered with a cutting calm. Perhaps ignorance, perhaps indifference, but the silence itself spoke volumes. She dismissed their schemes as meaningless, yet the echo of her influence on the Council, the Order, and above all her fallen student made her impossible to ignore. As the Order's gathering was set in motion, she wove another planned vengeance against all who had cast her aside, Jedi and Sith alike. Her knowledge of her prey was deep, especially of the one who severed her from the Force, and for that she waited with patient precision, knowing the moment would come. In exile, her former apprentice unleashed his hunger upon an entire world of seers, consuming its life and binding the lone survivor to his will. Guided by her, the outcast began to mend the shattered bond to the Force, a wound so vast it drew the Predator's gaze. His servant felt it too, whispering of a darkness so consuming that all existence fed its power, begging for release, yet pledging her life in chains. Sent to hunt the Exile, she clashed and fell, her weapon broken, her pride humbled, yielding with words that sealed her fate, her life for another's dot. She told of mercy given and a bond born from ruin, of a seer who once served a master of hunger, yet chose instead to follow the Exile. Through her words, the shape of her people's tragedy unfolded, of visions carved by the Force and a planet silenced into an empty echo. She spoke of hearing a presence like a sound just beyond reach, of being drawn to it, unable to turn away, an emissary carrying her master's will across the stars. His sight missed nothing, yet the Exile had escaped him, a truth that carried weight. His vessel wandered the edges of known space, unreachable until he summoned, and she knew with certainty that the meeting would come. Her kind lived to witness the galaxy's lifeblood, its radiant stars and its growth, all flowing through the Force. But her world was stripped of that current, left a hollow shell circling in silence. She had been there when life was bled away, when blindness fell upon her spirit, and she alone remained among ashes. The agony was a flame in the void, a beacon her master could not ignore. And so he came. She wondered still if death with the others might have been mercy, if she could have hidden that wound from the galaxy. Yet survival bound her, and in the end, her suffering became the chain that drew him to her. On the surface of her dead world, surrounded by the fallen of her people, she was claimed by a being who made her see the galaxy for the first time, and in that vision, she wished only for death. To the wider galaxy, her world was nothing but crude matter, stripped of the living currents of the Force. He revealed to her the swarms of disconnected beings scattered across countless worlds, blind to the flows that bound existence together. And through this revelation, he bent her to his cause, the belief that all life must end. Feeding on suffering, replacing chaos with silence, he was not flesh but hunger itself, a wound in the Force whose presence alone consumed life. Her people were doomed regardless, for the hunger would have reached them in time. Yet when the last Jedi Council sought refuge among them to glimpse the darkness that stalked them, they instead drew it closer, and so her planet perished, her people and the Jedi alike, leaving only her. His hunger cannot be restrained. Gatherings of Jedi call to him, and as their numbers dwindle, the threat of his power grows to the scale of eradicating all life with his very presence. In the shadow of this terror, the seer bound to him stands as both risk and key, for her death might be the only sacrifice capable of buying enough time to strike him down. She spoke with cold certainty, warning that no one could hold such power and still think as others do. She had hoped the battle could be avoided, but the arrival of another had changed everything he would have to be faced. This being, if he could still be called a man, was one of the Dark Lords, driven by hunger that stripped him of all but the faintest shred of feeling. His slave's survival was no accident. There was purpose in it, perhaps even a reason tied to the fate of the exile. When asked about this monstrous power, she revealed it was not strength but hunger, a curse as ancient as the Sith, a force that severs life and devours it. It cannot be taught, only endured, and it consumes the wielder as surely as it destroys those around him. His presence alone is death, feeding on all until nothing remains. Yet she insisted it was no weapon, no warship, but something far more terrible, subtle, insidious, inevitable. The Force binds and fuels all, but in his grasp it has become fire, and to learn it again would doom the galaxy. He is nothing but a hollow wound in the Force, feeding without restraint, draining life until nothing remains, and the path he walks leads only to an early grave. His hunger spreads slowly at times, as it did with his crew, and though one ally knew that starving him was the only way to defeat him, she also recognized that his hunger was not something he could aim or control. It was instinct, raw and endless. Drawn to worlds rich in the Force, he descended upon a place that called to him like a beacon, wiping it out without a thought, for he cared nothing for teachings of Sith or Jedi. His only future was an empty galaxy, consumed piece by piece, and so he had to be stopped before his power became absolute. Traveling with the Exile, his shadow was opposed by cunning deception. False whispers spread at the right time. One of his servants sought advantage on a world locked in political strife, where a hidden council member aided its queen. But entry to that planet was forbidden, and the Exile ship was attacked, forced to crash upon a wild moon where Mandalorians made their camp. Gaining their aid, the Exile prepared to strike, and their leader demanded the shuttle be ready, its systems checked, for the hour of departure was at hand. The armored warrior bristled at the challenge, insisting loyalty runs through his blood as it does through every fragment of his scattered people, vowing that soon they will rise united beneath his banner. His opponent counters with venomous calm, reminding him of broken fleets and the silence of Malachor, warning that perhaps the Mandalorians have been dying ever since, a shadow stretching into centuries. Rage ignites as the warrior spits back defiance, but the other presses deeper, cutting through bravado with truth's unspoken abandonment, wounds, the fear of being the last. Then comes the demand: protect the one who travels at their side, for she is more precious than any crusade, more vital than glory. The promise of answers to the questions burning within his armored shell hangs heavy, but only if his loyalty once more binds him to a cause not his own. It is spoken that when all is lost, honor must remain, carried forward like a memory into the future, and one voice urges another to forget the Jedi and keep their eyes on the one beside them. Upon reaching Onderon, the Wanderer aids a queen in turmoil, while in the shadows another slips away to awaken an injured soldier, whispering that his role is far from finished and warning him that hidden Jedi have revealed themselves on Telos. He rages that the war is not yet lost, while she murmurs that it is only beginning. Yet behind her words lies a scheme. One lone figure waits on Telos, And when the Great Hunger believes a world of power awaits, he will come, only to find nothing to sustain him, leaving him weak and exposed. The tale then shifts as the last remnants of the Jedi are summoned to Dantooine, to the shattered husk of their old enclave, destroyed years before in a war that burned away nearly all that once was. The hall stood silent, rebuilt long after the Council had abandoned its strength, and she had not walked within it for decades. Weariness pressed on her, yet her words lingered with sharp weight. Fear not for herself, but for the one who must face judgment. She urged trust in her, in training, in the choices already made. For all paths had led to this moment. When the Council finally spoke, they dismissed urgency, claiming the true enemy waited beyond sight, feeding on fear, feeding on death, and only those bound to the Force could oppose it. But beneath their calm, questions burned. Why had exile been the punishment? The answer came cold. Because war had been chosen. Because Revan was followed. Yet another truth whispered through the chamber. Others follow because of what lies within. Because one life moves many, shaping fate itself. And so the weight of revelation pressed down, leaving the air heavy with mistrust, prophecy, and the shadow of battles yet to come. They mirror the exile, torn between loyalty and defiance, drawn to a presence they cannot resist. One stumbles in foolish devotion, another kneels in silent worship. Even machines echo the bond. Influence lingers like a shadow, a weapon waiting to be wielded, just as it once was by another master. Yet the voice that speaks claims no power, no leadership, only the role of a mirror, reflecting truths unseen. Companions follow, unhesitating, bound by ties deeper than reason, their suffering and hope entwined with the exile's own. The wound of Malachor still screams, countless lives crushed and silenced, echoing endlessly within. It was not the Council that severed the bond, but survival itself. The exile, deafened, broken, yet made whole. Blindness brought sight, silence brought clarity, and in that wound the end of the Force was revealed. The exile became a cipher, carrying both ruin and revelation, a living scar that might decide the fate of all. They spoke of bonds forged not in trust but in hunger, of draining the will of others and feeding on their strength. A wound in the Force made flesh. One stood accused, branded as the shadow that spreads pain and suffering, condemned as a danger greater than Sith teachings themselves. The judgment was exile, severance from the Force, the harshest punishment, carried out in the name of necessity. Yet defiance rose in a cry enough, a vow that no harm would touch her again. Accusations of corruption, whispers of the Mandalorian wars, and the shadow of fallen masters hung in the air as they clashed over truth, betrayal, and the darkness waiting at the edges of the galaxy. The echo whispered of a world steeped in darkness, a wound in the galaxy where war had poisoned the very soil, corrupting all who walked its surface, feeding on death itself. There, power was promised, the kind that shattered wills and turned defenders into betrayers. And it was through such places that countless were broken, remade, and led astray. The Mandalorian wars, veiled as battle, were truly a campaign of conversion, ending in a horror no one could endure save one. That one turned away, abandoned the Force, and lived, not out of strength, but out of fear. When judgment came, the challenge was cast, to see not through the Force, but through the hollow eyes of exile. And so the Council fell, not by blade, but by vision shown a life stripped of the very power they clung to, a silence they could not bear. Where the exile endured, they withered, bound by dependence, so near to truth yet unable to surrender. What was sought was not their death, but their understanding, that the Force could not be grasped by creed alone. Every student trained had failed their code warriors, exiles, and wanderers. Yet in that failure lay the revelation, the breaking of illusions, and the rise of a harsher wisdom. The Council's fall was declared a victory, yet they perished believing themselves righteous. She once whispered that true triumph lies not in silencing another forever, but in bending their sight to one's own. To defeat with a blade is simple, but to conquer without striking, that was her intent. Still, it had to be done, for Jedi of such power could not be allowed to linger. Their presence in the Force, too dangerous. And so it begins. Hatred binds where peace never could, and even enemies unite against a greater foe. But when that foe is gone, unity shatters. betrayal festers, and only one will remain. Out of the shadows, the darkness stirs, and with it, the galaxy trembles toward death. She is gone now. The path leads to Atris, who may yet have the strength to act where the Council faltered. A messenger arrives, bearing grim tidings of Jedi gathered on Telos, a feast for the hungry and fuel for conquest. Soon a ship will come, carrying her, yet not to be surrendered. In the halls of silence, Atris claims her title, Jedi Master, last historian, last of her kind. But such words are frail when darkness closes in. This is not the first meeting. She was there before, at the Exile's judgment, the one who called for banishment. Recognition flickers familiar, eternal, always present. The truth strikes. She is the hand that struck the Jedi. She is Sith, yet titles are nothing. Only masks clung to as the shadows devour all. She spoke in shadows, a voice laced with irony and sorrow, declaring that who she was no longer mattered, only the role she had cast aside and yet could never truly escape. Once Darth Traya betrayed and betrayer, she knew the cycle demanded another to take her place. She revealed that the teachings of the Sith, though powerful, carried little truth, and yet they were steps along a darker path. She warned of holocrons gathered, servants chosen without the Force so they would never sense what their master had become. Her purpose had been to preserve the Jedi Order, but that same act drew ruin upon Telos, its destruction a consequence of knowledge too dangerous to remain hidden. The echoes of Malachor lingered, a reminder that it was not war that had broken him, but the wound within himself. Betrayal, she said, was not hers but his own, and unlike them, one cast out still held a chance of salvation. When asked of the Exile, she whispered that she would come, but too late to save either of them. Falling was a quiet thing, she mused, but admitting it was far worse. Elsewhere, allies scrambled in desperation. The warning that the Republic stood on the edge of ruin, countless innocent lives at risk. The desperate cry that the Exile had been taken by those who now knew the truth of her identity, carried to Telos where judgment awaited. And bound by fate, the danger was clear. If she were executed, the bond would drag her companion to death as well. There was no time left. All paths now led to Telos. She stood, cloaked in shadows, voice edged with scorn, yet trembling with conviction, declaring that this place, filled with stolen teachings and dark wisdom, belonged to her alone. Once she had been another, but that name was gone, buried beneath the weight of Sith secrets and her own festering emotions. She admitted there had always been something else inside, a hidden voice finally unbound, whispering through the old woman who forced her to listen to herself, to the galaxy, to destiny. Now she claimed it was foretold, this battle, this clash, the last obstacle before her enlightenment. She raged that the enemy had come, drawn by her designs, by the bait she had set in the Exile's return, and here at last they would face her. She called the Sith cowards, said she had lured them into the open, and that when she crushed them, she would rise stronger, ready to rebuild what was lost. No longer weak, no longer bound by the flaws of the past, she promised a new order, hardened by war, unyielding to any who dared oppose it, and the first step was to end the one standing before her. The clash burns with words sharper than blades, accusations of betrayal, of worlds destroyed, of masters twisting students into monsters. One voice condemns weakness and cowardice, branding the Jedi as no better than the Sith, demanding their teachings endure even if twisted. Another voice spits back, calling out deception, the massacre of Qatar, the manipulation of fate itself, punishment, sacrifice, hypocrisy, all thrown like weapons in the dark. The weight of Malachor still echoes, its screams haunting both sides, as the Exile stands against a teacher who dares claim that the end justifies every betrayal. Rage flares, but when the final challenge comes, kill me, end this. The air trembles with the refusal to strike down the defenseless, and the battle shifts from steel and fury to something heavier. The crushing gravity of truth. She faced her fallen sister in silence, refusing to strike her down. And in that refusal came a question. If not death, then what fate awaited? The other's voice trembled with disbelief, for mercy was never expected after such betrayal. Confessions poured out like cracks in stone, once a historian of the Jedi, clinging to knowledge in hopes of preserving the future, yet twisted by choices made in the name of the galaxy. She admitted her distance from the Order, her betrayal, her envy of the path once taken by her counterpart. And then, The warning. The Shadowed Master had gone to the graveyard world, Malachor V, where she waited to end all things. The truth struck hard. She sought not her old ally, but the exile, the one who carried a wound in the Force, a hollow scar born of destruction. That scar made paths vanish, silenced the song of the Force, and now it would be used to create an even greater void, one that would consume life itself. Only strength had endured it once before, and few could resist such emptiness again. The final choice loomed follow to Malachor, or let her die there and bring all to ruin. She was willing to sacrifice herself, and perhaps the galaxy, all for the one she claimed still mattered most. She spoke with a voice that trembled between warning and despair, confessing that only he held the power to stop the ruin ahead. For the one who sought to end Jedi, Sith, and even the Force itself saw him as the key. She told of dead places in the galaxy where the Force could not reach, voids born from the smallest choices, where a single soul at the right time could alter or end everything. Malachor V was where Surik must go, but her words carried the sting of her own broken ties to the Jedi, admitting exile was her fate and urging him to save Telos, the galaxy, and himself. The hissing of Sith holocrons haunted the silence as she confessed what she could not reveal, fear binding her tongue. For Malachor was not buried in the past, but rising again, its wounds echoing endlessly. As Nihilus descended upon Telos, the Republic fleet and Mandalorians rushed to resist, just as Kreia had foreseen, every shadow of prophecy circling back to the same wound, the same choice, and the same fear of being lost once more. The Mandalorians stepped forward, refusing to let ordinary soldiers slow the strike, declaring they alone would spearhead the assault. Side by side, they vowed to see the fight through, even as the Exile, the Seer, and their armored allies boarded the fractured vessel once haunted by a master of hunger. Despite the ship's broken frame, its field still clung to a breath of air, its scars from Malachor still visible, daring them to finish what had begun years before. Explosives were set, corridors secured, yet the shadows of the corrupted crew stood in their way, twisted remnants of loyalty to a master who devoured all life. Among them was one who confessed his servitude had been wasted, his world and people nothing but fuel for an endless hunger. The revelation struck deep. This lord was no conqueror, but a scavenger, bound to the wound of Malachor itself. His strength, born of that world, threatened to consume everything, even as his starving presence began to unravel within the broken ship. Be done, except wait. He is warned that if he goes, he will be destroyed. His last breath, nothing but shadow and pain. Yet the Exile, sharp in Kreia's lessons, twists the thought when Telos falls. Onderon will be next, and beyond it, the galaxy itself. The Colonel falters, then yields, swearing loyalty for Onderon's sake, a single step closer to the Dark Master. But another stands at the threshold of memory, a forgotten cell, a meditation chamber, a prison once, now sanctuary for a final moment of clarity. She speaks of the Force, of barren worlds once thriving, of strength found in loss, and begs forgiveness not for vengeance, but for life itself. Her body no longer a cage, her voice thanks the one who spared her, that she might discover conviction. Beyond the door lies the bridge, the Master waiting. The Exile warns the ship is set to explode, yet the enemy scoffs, believing survival assured. He is deceived, there are no Jedi here. Save those before him. Kreia's hand in the plan becomes clear. The one wound in the Force he cannot consume, a void against his hunger. His power, immense even in ruin, nearly breaks them. He is too strong, and yet, these as a sacrifice could weaken him. But instead, the Exile stands unyielding. Be done, except wait. If he goes to confront the enemy, he will be destroyed, his last moments consumed by shadow and pain. Yet the Exile, having learned manipulation well, warned that once the target world falls, the next to suffer will be another planet, and the galaxy itself would follow. Reluctantly, the Colonel agreed to report as ordered, knowing that betrayal meant certain death, yet choosing to act for his world's sake, another step closer to the final foe. A door opens to a forgotten cell, where a warrior seeks a moment of meditation, to shed hate and revenge, to fight for life itself, to confess and to thank the one who spared her long ago. Beyond lies the bridge and her former master. Time is short, the ship packed with explosives, yet he does not see it, convinced he can survive. The Exile reveals there are no Jedi aboard save those before him, setting the stage for the one he cannot consume. His attempt to drain her fails, the wound in the Force leaving him nothing to feed upon, though his power remains terrifying. Visas could weaken him by dying, yet instead, Surik, she struggles to hold the darkness at bay as the voice urges her to draw deeper from the Force, and in that clash of wills, another piece of the grand design falls into place. Through the haze, she sees with eyes and spirit alike, a graveyard world wrapped in the husks of dead fleets, its heartbeat echoing still. The vow is spoken she will follow her master wherever the path may lead, even to the end. Yet the shadow of Malachor looms, the place of failure, prison, and origin, where all debts demand payment. Here, the past converges, where strength is tested and echoes weigh heavy. The command is given, do nothing, only bring the exile before the master, for the shell of feeling must be broken, the blank slate inscribed with lessons of power and loss. As the darkness gathers, one truth resounds, Malachor is both tomb and trial, and only here will the final silence of its echoes be found. He once saw only fury when she stood ready to give her life for him, but that anger twisted into respect, then admiration, emotions he despised as weakness, and so his hatred burned hotter than ever. Waiting at the gates of the core, he resolved not to deliver her to another, but to cut her down himself, to prove his strength and reclaim the power he believed was rightfully his. As the ship crashed upon Malachor, she walked alone through the broken world, while her allies, scattered yet unyielding, prepared to confront the one who had taught and betrayed them all. I say we fire a rocket, end this now. One spat, only to be countered. It would not work, not against one who twists minds as weapons. Their resolve hardened. Their voices rose in defiance. She is not alone. We stand with her, and with her stand all the Jedi. The dark figure laughed coldly at the sight, calling them children wielding toys, mocking their scars, their blindness, their loyalty, daring any of them to step forward against her unarmed form, each insult cutting like a blade, yet only feeding the fire that would decide the fate of them all. A wasted pawn, mocked for innocence and devotion, is urged to think before throwing life away, warned of unfinished desires and unclaimed bonds. While the blind seer hungers for vengeance, yet is reminded that the Force flows even past the veil of broken sight, her gift twisted into torment, her blade drowned in the storm's howl. The assassin laughs at his lot, yet the truth unfolds. Allies were never slain, but imprisoned, forced into a cruel choice. One, however, was missing the general who forged the shadow weapon, whose fate was sealed in chaos, yet a fragment of him endured. His small creation, loyal and tireless, carried his last command. To awaken the machine once more, to bind engines into a chorus of destruction, and in its circuits lay the power to undo the wound carved into the stars. On the shattered world, he warned the exile that she would break them, mind and body, leaving nothing but ruin, urging them to surrender to the planet as so many before had. His voice dripped with hatred and obsession, confessing that her presence echoed within him like hers did, unspoken and unbearable, beautiful yet deadly. He claimed the Force bound him to endless resurrection, that through the cracks of his broken flesh, Malachor's darkness would keep him alive. But as the battle raged, the exile cut deeper than any blade, telling him he had already been defeated, that she would never respect one so dependent on the Force, that true strength lay in letting go. His rage turned to despair, his defiance to disbelief, as he demanded to know why she had chosen the exile instead of him, why it was possible for them to stand against what he could not. And on Malachor's scarred ground, the duel became more than a clash of blades. It was the breaking of a man who could not die, yet could no longer endure living. On the shattered world of Malachor, he warned the exile not to descend further, that she would break mind and body until nothing remained. He raged that her grip had already hollowed him, that the same fate awaited anyone who stood against her. His hatred burned, not only for her but for the exile as well, because both mirrored each other in ways he could not bear. He spat that beauty was weakness, that such weakness meant death, even the death of his master. He declared himself unkillable, the darkness of Malachor stitching his flesh back together each time he fell. Yet when the clash came, the exile spoke words sharper than any blade, revealing that respect could never come through endless dependence on the Force. His defiance crumbled under the truth that she would never honor one so bound, and in that revelation his strength began to break. Still he raged, still he rose, screaming that he could die 100 times and rise again. But the question gnawed at him: why had she chosen the exile? And what gave that one the power to stand where he could not? When the universe crumbles, only those unscarred cling to life. He admits the darkness defines him, yet even his hatred cannot defeat her. Sion surrenders to the feelings he once scorned, finally falling. Kreia warns she will shatter her student to prove how far one can descend, claiming her weakness lies in that very bond. To end her plan, Surik must die on Malachor V, releasing an echo that would unravel the Force itself. Confronting Kreia, Surik hears the truth. Malachor is unchanged, only perception shifts, and words fail to capture its horrors. Kreia denies destroying Atris, insisting she merely stripped away lies, forcing Surik to face her past and complete her training. There must always be a betrayer, Kreia says, for the galaxy needs one, even now at the end. In the shadows of a dying universe, the voice declared that to endure unscarred was the only way to live, as everything else perished, for the Force was identity itself, and the dark side its essence. Yet hatred alone proved too fragile, as shown when the student faltered, consumed not by rage but by emotions once seen as weakness. The Master warned that she would break him, revealing how far one could fall, for her weakness had always been him as his had been her. With weary acceptance, he was glad to depart, leaving only the end behind. To complete the plan, the exile's death at Malachor V would unleash an echo, rippling infinitely against the wound of that cursed world, unraveling the Force itself. Drawn to this fate, the exile arrived and faced the question: was Malachor unchanged, or was it perception that shifted? Kreia's words lingered, binding master and apprentice with promises of truth, no more shadows, only answers. When asked of Atris, Kreia denied destruction, claiming instead she stripped away illusion, for her teachings had to end, just as Malachor had to be faced again. It was all part of the path, all part of becoming complete. And in the end, she revealed the bitter truth: there must always be a betrayer, for the galaxy itself demands one. She confessed that every step had been manipulation, using the exile to lure enemies into battle, to expose corruption, to gather Jedi only so they could be destroyed, and to draw out those who had wounded her so the Republic could finish them. Yet when asked why it had to be Surik, she admitted there were others touched by the Force in strange ways, but none had ever chosen to cut themselves off so utterly, leaving behind a wound that echoed across creation. There was no revelation, no secret, only the truth of the exile. And still, when offered mercy, she revealed she had longed to hear those words, but mercy was not what she wanted. She wanted the bond broken, the apprentice to shatter the master. If the exile would not strike, then she would, for anything less would render every struggle meaningless. Even when bested, she demanded death, but still her student refused, leaving the battle as much about will as it was about power. A final clash of philosophy, betrayal, and tragic inevitability. Strike me down. End this if you must, but mercy is not in your heart, only the will to endure. Yet you will not grant me release, for I see you will break me long before you offer such grace. And so it is finished. At last. Greater than any I have ever trained, you have given me the truest gift in this moment, for in my death I find the reward of your strength. You speak of saving me, but you already have, and that is enough to carry forward into the ages yet to come. Here, at the heart of Malachor, where the currents of power converge, I look into the threads of destiny. This is my final gift, from one exile to another. You wonder of your companions, yet you do not truly know them, though they have walked beside you. Reach through the unseen currents, hear their thoughts, and know they are the lost ones, the true heirs upon which the future will rest. They needed but a guide and a teacher. The blinded one shall return to her world, and as she once looked upon you, she will look upon her home and at last see what was hidden from her. As for whether you saved her from the abyss, salvation is but a matter of perception. Yet by your measure, yes. The warrior of iron will march through battles yet to come, as the one before him intended. A general needs both an army and trust, and though broken, he remains loyal. But his people are doomed to a long death, their legacy bound only to code, to history, to armor, clinging to hollow flesh too easily fell. And the disciple, bound by pure devotion, cannot help but love you, an ideal that endures, though unreturned, never dimming, never fading. He speaks of a future where one will leave this place, even the galaxy itself, to sit upon a council not out of ambition but duty, never forgetting the Jedi who had once lost the Force yet guided him back to it. But the truth remains, he must be left behind, as another once left behind all they loved. The fool, ever watched by the Force, survives, as always, and even his feelings reveal themselves as nothing more than foolishness. Another sacrifice, however, speaks louder than words, for none would give their life for one they did not care for. To some, she confesses that love was born not from being Jedi, but from being something else entirely rare, untamed, irreplaceable. The huntress who once lived in shadows learns to stop hunting and to truly live, yet her fate is sealed. Years later, on a forgotten world, she will choose death to save others, and she will embrace it without regret. The machines, too, follow paths unseen, their destinies hidden even from her sight. The seer's voice carried the weight of fate as she declared that one last journey remained, a path into the unknown regions where shadows stirred and the true enemy awaited. She spoke of companions who had walked beside the exile, their part fulfilled, their futures brighter for the bond they once shared. Of the Republic, she foresaw its endless cycle of rise and ruin, yet also glimpsed worlds healing, Telos reborn in golden fields, Onderon prospering, though its people would lose themselves in the tide of the Republic, Dantooine rebuilt on the strength of its defenders, Nar Shaddaa clawing hope out of despair. Then her gaze turned to the exile, not with command, but with choice. Take a ship and leave, remain upon the scarred world for those who would come, or return to exile with no shame. Each path held meaning, but none without consequence. And when the name of the one who had gone before was spoken, her silence carried the weight of mystery, leaving only the question of where he had vanished into the dark. The Sith are no more those who served at the Academy, those broken shells of darkness. They've already fallen. Yet the truth cuts deeper. The Sith are not just assassins, not just shattered remnants of a republic or machines forged in war. The Sith are belief, an empire hidden beyond the stars, waiting in shadows. He knew this and walked into the void alone, leaving behind ship, machine, and love alike, for such ties would only lead to ruin. She never understood war as he did, strong-willed, defiant, unable to see that even a Jedi cannot command the heart. Sacrifices must be made, but some tear deeper than any blade. Why not follow him? Because none knew where he had gone. Would one have gone, had he asked? Perhaps. He will need warriors, light and dark alike, to meet the end of all things. Perhaps she will be among them, destined to walk that path and find him, her fate bound to shape centuries yet to come. Kreia whispers of her future only in shadows, hinting, never telling. For what weight would truth have carried then? To the galaxy, she is the exile. To Kreia, she was far more. Yet the Force weaves as it wills, and even love, even destiny, bends beneath its hand. In the end, it could only unravel this way, the last clash inevitable on the desolate stage of Malachor. Surik wished for another path, but her master left no room for escape, whispering of choices, of war, of voices calling from the void beyond the stars. The Republic was abandoned, death embraced, and the question lingered, are you ready? Every step, every decision carved this destiny, shaping what she had become. Kreia's shadowed words carried truths too vast, too dangerous, never meant for steady minds, leaving behind not just a battle lost, but a legacy of paradox, wisdom, and tragedy, echoing in the silence where the Force itself trembled.